Morning, everyone. So there's been a lot of talk about the dire state of the British economy and the black hole that we're suffering, or supposed black hole. So what I wanted to do today was to look at this black hole, whether it actually exists. It's a spoiler, it doesn't. And then I wanted to look a little bit at the valuations that we're seeing, particularly in the US, which the guys have covered a little bit, but I'll cover a little bit more detail. But it's interesting being up on my feet this time around, because obviously you've had the budget last year, which was meant to be the one-off amount of time for raising taxes, and now here we are again with another budget for more taxes. And it's interesting because every government, I think, blames the last one for their ills. They all do it. So I'm listening to a very, very good book by Dominic Sandbrook covering the 70s and the early 80s. Great read, very long books. Actually, I'm listening to it, but it's about 40 hours. But it's fascinating. It takes me back to when I was a lot younger. But the Wilson government of 74 blamed the Heath government. Margaret Thatcher blamed the Callaghan government. The Tory government of 2010 blamed Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and now it goes full circle. The problem with it is they do it to get elected, but in doing it, they scare the living daylights out of everybody. So when they scare the living daylights out of you, you don't go and buy things, you tighten your belt, and the economy slaps. So in their effort to get elected, they create themselves a problem, and you can only blame the last party for so long. But there really is no justification. Anyway, this is what you get scared by. This is what they say. Ooh, debt. It's going up, it's going up, it's going up. And here you can see 370 billion is the total amount of UK government debt. This is UK government net debt. And now at the end of last year, it was 2.82 trillion. Of course, that doesn't really mean anything, because the important thing with debt is how it's relative to your income. So if I adjust this to the way you're used to learning about debt or hearing about it in terms of GDP, you see the red line at the top is those figures we've just been looking at expressed as a percentage of GDP. So our total output. And it's gone up. It's gone up quite a lot. It's up to about 100% of GDP. And you can see it's been on a steady rise post the global financial crisis. Contrary to what a lot of people say about Blair and Brown, they actually didn't grow the debt that much in their initial years in power. It exploded due to the global financial crisis, but that was hardly their fault. And it stabilized sort of recently. Now, the line below is a different calculation of debt. It's public sector net financial liabilities, this one. And this is a test now, because it's slightly lower. Now, I've put this up here because I noticed that the Labour Party are now talking about debt to GDP as being just over 80%, which sounds a lot better than just over 100%. But they're quoting an entirely different figure to the one they quoted previously. Would anybody like to guess what brings the black line down from the red line? We have talked about it before. So there's something included in that black line, which is obviously an asset because it reduces the debt to GDP. Any guesses? It's not infrastructure. Good shout. There's another chart coming up later with infrastructure on it. It is student debt, which is about 9% of GDP. So the red line assumes that the students won't pay it back, and the black line says they will. You can make your own choice. In fact, most of these kids do pay it back, but there you go. So actually, but what you can see, it's not too bad. It's topped out. Now, if you get away from government, which has been increasing debt, or at least stabilizing it, you find a very, very different story to what's going in other sectors. This is the borrowing as a percentage of GDP of UK companies. And what you can see here we are back in 2000, it's 292% of GDP. But when you come down to last year, it's down to 209%. And you can see this precipitous drop. It's gone from over 290% down to 210. So companies post the global financial crisis have generally been paying down their debt. They've not liked holding debt because everybody got scared by what happened. And banks withdrew a some of you in this room would have experienced this. Banks withdrew a lot of support around 2008, 2009. And it spooked companies, so they don't want to rely on the banks so much, so they pay down debt. But even more than that, they've also been building up assets. So you can see here, this is kind of the net assets of all UK corporations. And generally, they run their balance sheets. They don't want to keep too much asset on balance sheets, because you don't want the companies you've invested in just sitting on asset for the sake of it. You know, if they're going to just sit on cash and not do very much or buy assets themselves, you can do that. So it would be normal then for them to give you your money back. But companies have been building up assets, and they've actually built up 1.91 trillion in terms of total assets. And you can see this racing up here as this savings rate goes up. But what about families? What about us? What about the people that are, you know, earning and spending? What have they been doing? Well, families have been paying down loads of debt as well. Here's debt to GDP, rockets up through here, through this boom period. Of course, this is because families are accruing lots of debt, buying houses, taking on mortgages, and it peaks just over 104% of GDP in 2009. And after that, we don't want to borrow. The global financial crisis spooks us, and we pay down debt to the extent it's now down to just under 80% of GDP. So we've actually paid off amount equivalent to 25% of GDP. No black hole, really, is there? If we take total debt, and this is very, very important, because it doesn't really matter where the debt sits. It's just a case of the ability for us to service it. So you can see in 2020 here, there's a big spike. This is the ratio of total debt to GDP. Anybody want to guess why the spike happens here? COVID, yes, absolutely. Because it's the denominator, i.e. the GDP in this thing, actually drops because we shut the economy down. But we've paid down an enormous amount of debt from 2020. Total debt was 543% of GDP. It's now down to 385%. In fact, you know, it's back to the levels of the start of the century. So that's no bubble. And finances were really good here. I think when Ken Clarke handed over the keys to the Exchequer to Gordon Brown, debt to GDP was just over 30%. So that's the accumulated. What are we like on a regular basis? This is the red bars are the total amount the government needs to borrow every year. In other words, it's its shortfall. It's the difference between what it gets in and what it spends. And you can see generally these bars are red. Now, governments have to borrow money. You do not want your government running a surplus. It happened a little bit here, but because the way these things work in terms of the sectors, everything has to come back to zero. So when you put all these sectors together, whether it's government, households, corporate, foreign, you have to get back to zero. It's just the way the figures work, because money's a human creation. It's not scientific. It's one of the most brilliant creations of all time, because it enables us to specialize and to save and to build capital. But it has to come back to zero. So you would think, wouldn't you, that this would be good with the government running a surplus, but it's not, because generally when the government runs a surplus, somebody else is running a big deficit. So although those red bars don't look great, and although Rachel Reeves will go on and on and on talking about why this is a bad thing, it's not that bad really, because all the other sectors, when you look at and add their balances up, you get this lovely symmetry. And if I make it really easy and we just look at the government versus the non-government, you see it looks like this. So every time the government runs a deficit, the non-government sector runs a surplus. So I haven't made these figures up. These come from the ONS, and that's what it looks like. Now, the politicians don't tell you this, that when they don't come around and say, oh, this is great. The government have gone into surplus, but it means the private sector's gone into deficit. And here we were building up far too much debt in one sector. The key thing is this: there isn't really such a thing as government. It's a concept. It's only us. It's only us in the country. We own it. So the only choices we're making is where do we put the debt and where do we hold the assets? And that's it. And if I gave you an idea, if we didn't have debt, if the government didn't have debt, you would not have an economy in the way it works today. So if I split you in two, and assuming we're coming down the middle here, and we're assuming we've got one product, we've got a closed economy, and let's say it's wheat. And on the left, you are super productive and you produce a big surplus of wheat. So you can feed yourself and have some left over. And on the right, you are profligate. Sorry, Anthony, you're profligate and you don't produce enough wheat to feed yourselves. And these people have got this surplus. So we have an issue. And you all get together and think, well, you know, they might have had a better year with their crops than us. How are we going to deal with this? So what you do, you create a committee and you say, well, we'll have this committee here. What that committee will do, it will take the wheat from the people that have got the surplus and it will give them a receipt. So the committee owes these people a certain amount of wheat. And now it's going to give that surplus wheat to you so that you can feed yourselves and spend it. But you've now got debt in a government. And that's how it works. That's simply how it works. And once you've got debt, you can have money. If you don't have debt, you can't have money. Alexander Hamilton completely understood this. You know, if you look at what he did, way ahead of his time in the 1780s, founding effectively what is the modern Fed and the American system. It was brilliant. The other thing he did, which is quite fascinating, he knew they had to get industry going because it was America back in the time was very much an agricultural economy. So he wanted to encourage the technology of the time. So you would bribe factory workers from Britain to come over and show them how to set up factories. And I think that's why the Americans are so worried about the Chinese, because the Chinese are doing to them exactly what the Americans did to the British in the late 1700s, early 1800s. But you can see here, it's not such a bad thing. Now, question then, how does debt to GDP come down and fluctuate? First of all, you can see that this is I love this chart because it goes back to the time of Queen Anne, early 1700s, and it shows total debt to GDP. So you can see that despite the fact that Rachel wants to scare you, you should just say to her, what's the problem? Debt to GDP is about its long-term average. And corporations have got less debt than they've had previously, and so have households. What's the problem? So how do we get these rises and falls? And it's the same thing I've mentioned earlier. It's in the denominator. We don't actually pay down debt. We just grow the economy a bit faster than we grow the debt, and that's when you've got good productivity. And through this period, sort of Victorian age, we have great productivity and we shrink the debt down to 28% of GDP. Then, of course, we have 2 world wars, not very good productivity, and it balloons up to 259%. And thanks to the Marshall Plan and the very, very good restructuring of Europe, it comes down again until we get below 30% in 1990. The reason it's changing is because the economy is growing at a faster rate. So the Labour Party are absolutely right where they say what we want is growth. Completely barking mad in the way they go about getting it. Okay, you're not going to tax yourself to grow. And that's the thing. So what we do need is productivity. So let's look at the overall picture now. This is now showing you the total value of the UK. So we're looking at government debt, government assets, that infrastructure you mentioned earlier, household assets, household debt. And what you can see there is that the blue lines are the household net worth, by far holding the most wealth in this country, which is a good thing. And we've got total net assets of 13 trillion. So that at the end of 2024, if we'd sold all our assets and paid off all our debts, government, households, companies, we would have sat with 13 trillion in our pockets. That's not a bad position to be in. But it doesn't really matter about the numbers. It matters about the productive capacity of your economy and the people in it. And that's the key thing. And we're not doing so badly at all. So here's the issue, the productivity problem that everybody's bothered about because it's just kind of lost its way. 1972, the rolling average increase in productivity is 4.51%. Now, this is very, very important because we could easily increase the size of the economy by pouring a load of investment into it or simply increasing the workforce. So, but it doesn't increase the output per head. People are not better off necessarily, just spreading the cake wider. To get an improvement, you need to improve productivity. So we need to improve the amount that each one of us is producing with regard to services or productivity. And we're in a bit of a slump. You know, it's lowest. It's not quite as low as it was in 1893, but it's not far off, and it's been dipping recently. Now, there may be a number of reasons for that. We may be counting it differently. We may have young people spending too much time on their phone playing games and not out serving you coffees or making something productive. But it will change. It will change. We'll find out ways of going forward. AI is going to make a big difference. You know, I'm probably a bit more skeptical. I know the effect it's having on our business is positive. There's lots of things that AI does is very good. I like asking ChatGPT questions because it's always so polite to me. And I am very polite to ChatGPT or Copilot as we use because I've watched every episode of Terminator and I know what happens if you're nasty to AI. It destroys you. So what do you need to get this growth going? What do you need to get productivity going? Well, we need people spending more money. Now, Brits are saving more than normal. This is the saving rate. This is the amount of disposable income that Brits are saving, and we're over 10%. Long-term average is about 7%. If we can get households to just save a little less, just a little less, spend 3% more. So please put money away. Households have got to put money away. You've got to put money away so that when they retire, they can live. They can buy things. They can buy cars. You know, do different things. Give kids money. Well, yeah. Good luck to children trying to get in the old days, you go into the local building society, and if you're polite and they liked you, they just gave you the money. It was as simple as that. No chance these days. Well, you've got no branch to go into, and it's difficult to speak to a human being at a bank. But so the savings rate's high. Now, if we can get that down, we're going to spend a bit more. We're going to perhaps go out once a week, once a month more to see somewhere nice, have an extra holiday. Upgrade the car, do something else. That's all positive. So that would be really good for the economy. But the other thing that's been a bit of a problem, we've all become a bit more cautious. This is mortgage equity withdrawal. Do you remember that? Mortgage equity withdrawal. When we used to shove extra money on our mortgage to go and buy a new car, have a decent holiday, or do something. The red is when we were doing that. We would get confident, the value of our houses would go up. We'd go to the building society, we'd like, I'd like to borrow 20, 30 grand. They say, what for? We'll say, well, I'm going to think about doing an extension. Yeah, you can have the money. You walk straight out, go down to the local car dealer and buy a brand new car. No one asked any questions. But it meant you get big items. The other thing you were doing more of was more repairs, extensions. There's some people in the room, I know, Derek and Rachel can't walk straight to talk to you about this because she actually said on her feet that Labour have simplified the planning system. Has anybody tried to get planning permission on anything? But my goodness me, it's crazy. And this is another feature. You know, if we can get people prepared to borrow against their capital again and do a few bits and pieces, it will boost the economy. And good luck with the 1.5 million houses. I made a risky prediction last year, and I think because this is the last of the series of seminars we do, I get a bit demob happy and start saying things I shouldn't. But I can't see any compliance people around here at the moment, so to be safe. But I will predict this: they will not build 1.5 million houses in this term. Not a chance. Not a chance. So there isn't a black hole really. There's a lot of money around. And if we could just do a bit more with it, spend a little bit more, do a bit more capital investment, we'll kick the economy on. So spend. Spend. It's good for you, it's good for your children. Don't worry about taking money out of people's portfolios. We can live with it. Go and enjoy it. Go and enjoy it. So finally, I'm sort of equity valuations, which we've been going on about, and I wanted to try and give you a feel for what the evaluations are like in a slightly different way. So I've got this example. I've got company A and company B. So I apologise to all of you that suffer from basic colour blindness. I use the wrong colours. Just they are red and green. But of course, those that suffer from colour blindness, my long-standing and very patient business partner can't see the difference on those because he sees the same. In which case, just worry about company A on the left, company B on the right. So this is company A has turnover of 130 billion pounds, all in pounds. And company B has turnover of just under 1.8 trillion. So company B is much bigger, sells a lot more product than company A. Company A is very profitable, makes 55 billion a year in profits. That's not bad on a turnover of 130 million. That's a very, very good margin. Company B doesn't make as big a margin, but makes a lot more profit, 122 billion. Company A generates cash flow, spendable cash, which it can do what it wants with, pay out dividends, reinvest back into capital if it needs to, 46 billion. Company B makes 135 billion in cash. Balance sheet. Company A's got a pretty low balance sheet, relatively 60 billion on the balance sheet. That's its assets. But company B's balance sheet, nearly 1.15 trillion, hugely different. In terms of cost, company A will cost you 3.25 trillion pounds. Company B, 2.5 trillion. So there's a quick summary. You can see the green bars, these ones for company A, do a lot better on every measure: balance sheet value, cash flow generation, total revenue, total profit, except it costs you a lot more to buy company A than it does company B. Does anybody have a guess who company A is? Company A is Nvidia. Company B, the whole FTSE 100. So you can either go out, if you've got 3.25 trillion pounds burning a hole in your pocket, you can go and buy Nvidia, or you can buy Rolls-Royce, Pru, Lloyds, Anglo-American, Diageo, Rio Tinto, all these wonderful companies, Tesco, AstraZeneca. You can buy all those and have 750 billion left in your pocket to go and spend, get the economy going. So there's an enormous difference. It's a bit like going out with somebody into a coffee bar and choosing the place that gives you a cappuccino for £22 instead of the one next door which sells it to you for £3.50. And the odd thing with stock markets is that it's probably one of the few areas you ever get where the price goes up encourages more people to buy. Most of your other, what you do with economies, you go for price, you go for value. But with stock market, very often it sucks the money in when companies doing well. So here's perhaps then something to think about, because there isn't, the thing with it, Nvidia is not a bad company, nor's Amazon, nor's Alphabet, or they're good businesses, they're cash generative, making money. But this is what happened back at the last, I think one of the things when you get older, there's a phrase, isn't there, that history doesn't repeat, but it does often rhyme. And I think one of the quite nice things about getting old is something happens that you think, I remember that. I remember something similar to that. So it gives you context. I think it's the only thing that keeps me in the job. But these guys get fed up. These guys, I think, get fed up me telling my old stories, a bit like Corporal Jones on Dad's Army. But this is Cisco, right? And this is 95 up to 2000. And Cisco made the switches and routers upon which the internet was built. So really good company. If you like, it was the picks and shovels company or provider for the dot-com gold rush. And you can see that if you invested in Cisco in 1995, then by the turn of the century, you'd got a return of nearly 3,500%. It's enormous. You did quite well if you invested in just big American companies. They went up 184%, but Cisco does much better. Now it crashes, but even taking account of the crash, you up until this year, you still made 4,000% on Cisco. You made 1,260% roughly on broad stock. So Cisco still outperforms from 95 all the way through. But what if you bought Cisco at its peak? Not so good, because if you bought Cisco at its peak in 2000, you still haven't got your money back. And the S&P 500 has returned for you 340%. So you've massively underperformed in the last 25 years. What happened to Cisco? Was it a bad company? No. This is the bubble bursting, and this is Cisco's turnover. Cisco is a brilliant business, done fantastic over the years. Its revenue goes on up, but it was not going up fast enough to justify its valuation. And this is the same with NVIDIA. You've got to get a 15 to 20% growth on earnings every year with NVIDIA to justify its current price. You need more if it's going to go up. So whilst it's a very, very good business, it only needs another competitor to come along, produce a better chip, and its price is going to fall back. So you have to be very careful about what you buy. But that I thought was interesting, because when we say we don't like, the guys have touched on it today. Very often it's not that you don't like the business, it's you just don't like the price you've been asked for. And there's NVIDIA now. So make your own judgments from that. Right. Now, last year I got very, very, very chatty on stage in the Q&A, and I made a prediction. I think Jamie asked me what I thought of the Magnificent Seven. Your NVIDIA, Google, Facebook or Meta, Tesla, and I said they will underperform this year. So I've been told, because I said it on screen, I have to cover it and tell you whether I was right or not. So I'm going to get to that, which is typical of me, because when I don't want to give you an answer, I talk a lot, which is I can come back on something else. But this is the other things I said last year, in addition to in the Q&A saying that the Mag 7 would underperform. I said that the secular bond market, what I said was bonds can't keep going up in price, and they haven't done. They've returned a marginal amount this year, but they're not doing anything like it. Equity market values like a barbell. You were very, very expensive and very, very cheap. Still the same. UK looked cheap. FTSE 100 did very well, and we did well on the back of that last year. Europe looked okay too. I said last year, Trump may, or this is straight from the slides last year, Trump may or may not prove inflationary, because when I was on my feet in December last year, we didn't know what he was going to do with tariffs. Austerity is dead and buried. No government can bring austerity in again. They've got to spend. Even the Germans have got to spend now. You know, that's a big change. They've got to spend, because their infrastructure, they've not invested enough in their infrastructure. They're really mean with their public finances. They need to get money spent. Fortunately for Putin and Trump, they've reminded the Germans that, you know, having Russia on their eastern borders is not as safe as they thought it was, even though they were buying their oil. So they're now ramping up their defences, something they've got a good track record of building efficiently and very quickly. So lots of good opportunities for different investors. Be very careful to get rich value, quick assets. So what we're saying this year, I said, Trump will prove inflationary. Whether you are pro-Trump or anti-Trump, tariffs are not going to do the American economy a lot of good in the long run. It may be a good gimmick. How long, Courtney? 5 minutes. It may be a good gimmick, but it's going to push prices up. Tariffs create inflation, and the US has had that. And because of that, US exceptionalism is going to be dead. And that's on a relative basis. Interestingly, there's a very interesting piece came out recently. I put it in my pocket. I will read it. It's a piece from the. Perhaps I won't read it. It looks like it's fallen out. Is there a bit of paper lying on the floor over there? No, I've got it. Here it is. So there's one of the interesting things about China is that, I mean, it's a remarkable economy. What they've been doing is quite remarkable. Jake has just bought a Chinese electric car. Actually, it's a joint project with Stellantis, which we own in the portfolio. So he was actually keeping it in the family. But it's an amazing price. And there was somebody said to me recently, the difference between the Americans and the Chinese, the Americans have a problem, they throw lawyers at it. If the Chinese have a problem, they throw engineers at it. And there's a lot of truth in that. But this is one of the things the Chinese economy has been doing, is investing. So their savings rate is astronomical, and because it has to balance, it has to go into something. So investing, cap expenditure, kind of in savings, for about 45% of the economy. It's significantly less than that. But although it's a communist economy, a newspaper article came out, which is a sort of a mouthpiece for the Chinese Communist Party, and the heading was, "Expanding domestic demand is a strategic move. In the past, when our country had surplus production capacity, the focus was placed on expanding investment and increasing production capacity. Now, with overall excess capacity, continuing to rely on large-scale investment is limited in effect, and its marginal utility is diminishing. While expanding effective investment and leveraging its key role, we must also more effectively harness the fundamental role of consumption in driving growth." I mean, this is unbelievable. This is a communist country that says we need consumption. We need people consuming. Now, the thing to remember is that, China is, you go back to that chart I put there at the time of Queen Anne, China was the hegemony back then. It was the powerful economy. 2 minutes. It was the powerful economy. And it lost its way through various things, but it's coming back, and it's coming back with a vengeance. But that's exciting for the global economy, because whilst China's been very good at producing things, it's not been so very good at buying things. So it exports more than it imports. And if it gets its people buying more, it creates a source of demand, which it needs to do. So that's actually extremely positive. And that's going to push the Americans under pressure again. So I've said there's no black hole. I said UK government policy will remain growth unfriendly. I'm afraid I don't think that's going to change very much. And finally, we've got the issue of me promising or saying that, forecasting that there will be the Mag 7 will underperform. So the grey bars, now anyone colourblind should be able to spot the difference because of the contrast. The grey bars are the changes in Mag 7 stocks. You can see Google was the best performer last year, 57%. These are all up to the 1st of December. Nvidia, 26%. The Mag 7, there's an index now out on the Mag 7, which is quoted on Bloomberg. So this isn't me making it up. 15.9%, and they outperformed the S&P 500, which returned 9.6%. So these are all in GBP terms, so it's consistent. So unfortunately, I didn't say what I was comparing it to. I said they will underperform. I didn't say so. It's the S&P 500, but our growth fund beat the Mag 7. So even though the Mag 7 didn't put the S&P 500, it didn't beat us. And for me, that's good enough. And I hope it's good enough for you. Not only that, the black bar on the right shows the volatility we had in that period under 12, whereas the Mag 7 did it with 26% volatility. So we managed to deliver the return with a lot less volatility than the rest of the market. So for us, this was a much better year than when I was on my feet in 2023 or 2024, where I was constantly going on about overvaluations. But last year, it came really good, and we did it without taking excessive risk. So thank you very much for bearing with us and trusting us with your capital this year. Have a great Christmas. See you next year.